G'day, Cormnet2000 here. I'm back with another Borderlands build for you guys, as today I'm going to be going over my Bashin Boyo 2.0 build. Bashin Boyo is a quote-unquote melee Zane build that focuses on using the face puncher to absolutely destroy all the content in the game. It can do the Malamon and Guardian takedown with ease, it can do mobbing extremely well, it can boss extremely easily and is a lot simpler to do, unlike other builds that require a back burner, a fucking snowdrift, a max speed slide while timing your fucking rockets to be able to boss, which is fucking annoying. This build's a lot easier. Just pop your clone, pop your barrier, and then just start shooting. And yeah, that's also something I should mention. This is a clone and barrier build. And the clone side of this build is going to surprise a lot of people, as this does not use the double barrel skill. The clone is not our main source of damage, as he's actually here to give us some support, useful support, as he essentially will be our medic. And he will be able to keep us alive, as Zane is not a good character for the face puncher. The face puncher is just a stupidly strong gun, and Zane can buff it up by a little bit, and we've got skills and action skills that can help mitigate some of the quirks the face puncher has when used on Zane. I'll have timestamps in the description so you can bounce between different parts of this build, so if you want to go back to this video and check certain parts out just to make sure something, you can do that. So yeah, well, let's just jump into this. So starting with the gear, as you can see I'm running a pretty bare bones setup, as I've only got 4 pieces of gear on me. And yeah, I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible, as there's some math and some weird damage number calculation bullshit when it comes to Zane and his damage formula, but I'm not really a person that's worth talking about on that, as I don't know shit about that. So if you want to know how everything works a lot better, you want to check other people out. But basically, let's ignore all that and let's just go into the gear. The face puncher is the star of the show, and this is a shotgun that when you shoot enemies, its shots counts as dealing melee attacks. What this means is that whenever you shoot an enemy, it's going to count as hitting an enemy with 7 melee attacks at once. And this means that it comes with all the caveats that all melee attacks have. So melee scales with mayhem level, which means the face puncher scales with mayhem level, so it means it does more damage on mayhem 10 than it does on mayhem 0. The face puncher cannot hit crits, because melee cannot hit critical hits, which is really annoying, but that's just how it is. It can utilize melee artifacts that can give it bonus damage, bonus lifesteal, the ability to steal ammo, shit like that. Even apply sticky bombs depending on what artifact you're using, or chain electrical chains to nearby enemies, as it can use melee artifacts, which is really cool. And it scales off of melee damage as well as gun damage, which people seem to forget that the face puncher can scale off of gun damage. I don't know why that is, as when people think of the face puncher, they think it scales with melee damage. That's the damage you want to boost up. It's still a gun, it still scales off of gun damage, and this is how Zane can boost the face puncher up by a lot, as what Zane lacks in any melee skills that help the face puncher, he makes up for it in being able to boost the gun damage of it by a lot, which is helpful. As for the anointment I'm running on the face puncher, I'm using a 1 action skill and is active, your weapon damage is increased by 200%. This is simply the best in slot we've got access to, as we're running a clone and a barrier. We're not got a lot of good options when it comes to boosting damage. The clone swapping, the bonus damage when swapping places with your clone anointment is essentially the exact same damage type the anointment I'm using is, except you're getting 70% less damage and you have to switch places with your clone all the fucking time, which is annoying. The Sentinel Cryo anointment doesn't work on the face puncher, and we're not using the drone, so that's out the question. Zane doesn't have any good action skills that work with the action skill and anointments, so that's not really an option. And we need our action skills up all the time for best survivability, so again, that is out of the question. The consecutive hits gives the exact same damage when it's fully stacked up, and you need to keep hitting shots all the time, which isn't exactly going to happen when you've got a fairly low magazine size. And the only other anointment that would be able to give you some good damage is the URAD anointment, which in other words is the while your health is below 50% health, you gain 150% bonus radiation damage. That requires running the front loader shield or a deathless artifact, which isn't good when trying to max out damage, as a front loader or a deathless with a URAD face puncher doesn't do as much damage as my current setup. And you have the caveat of being able to get one-shotted and instantly downed, because you're running your health is basically at 1 health or below half health, which is annoying. So yeah, this anointment is best in slot, and again, most Zane mains that understand the math of this game will know that this anointment isn't the best for Zane, as it just boosts gun damage, and with the way this scaling works, boosting a lot in one type of damage, like boosting a lot in gun damage, there's diminishing returns and shit like that. Yada yada yada, it's maths that we're not really giving a shit about. This just gives the most amount of damage for what we're doing, so that's why we've got this anointment. You could run it without any useful anointment and you'd still be doing alright, but anointments are kind of a thing that everyone goes for on Mayhem 10, since every Mayhem 10 gun is guaranteed to spawn with an anointment, unless it is scripted not to have an anointment, period. Anyway, moving on to the shield, we're using the Stinger Shield. Stinger Shield, it has two really interesting effects on it. The first one that most people know it for is when your shield is depleted, it will trigger a Nova, a melee Nova, and that melee Nova deals melee damage in a similar way to how the face puncher does, and it scales off of melee damage like how the face puncher does. So everything I mentioned about how the face puncher works with melee, the Stinger does the exact same thing, except it does one really powerful Nova that does a lot of damage. Now we're not actually using that effect on the Stinger because, well, Zane doesn't scale best with melee damage, and it's just not really going to be the best option. And this is not a Stinger spam build, as those are builds that work best on Amaro and Flak. The other effect that we are actually using is while your shields are full, melee damage is increased by 50%. This is really good on Zane because Zane is a master of keeping his shields up all the damn time, as his barrier essentially stops him from taking damage. And if he does take damage, this shield has a really quick recharge delay and has a pretty decent recharge rate, even though it has a low capacity. So if you take a little bit of damage, the barrier is going to stop you from taking more damage, and your shield's going to come back pretty much instantly, and you're going to get as much more bonus damage. This is great because we need to milk out as much damage as possible off a face puncher when Zane's skills aren't going to help that much. As for the anointment, best in slot's going to be action skill and gain bonus elemental damage, but you really don't need it as we're not focusing on action skill and anointment. So any anointment works, the Stinger is the only thing you need. Speaking of those action skill and anointments, the grenade is going to be literally anything you want. We're only going to be using it for maybe that anointment, and even then you don't need it. So grenade is actually worthless as we're not actually having the ability to throw grenades at all, and our clone's not going to throw them for us. So yeah, grenade, whatever you want. As for the class mod, we're running the Seeing Dead. The Seeing Dead is just simply best in slot. Whenever you damage an enemy with your weapon, you have a chance to automatically activate all your kill skills, and your kill skills gain a 25% effect bonus, which is really handy. What this means is that thanks to one of Zane's kill skills, which essentially gives you bonus action skill duration whenever you get a kill skill, this allows us to have our action skills up pretty much forever as long as we're able to shoot enemies, and it's a really good class mod for Zane, and kind of Zane's only truly good class mod in the game currently. Now the annoying thing is that this does require the Handsome Jackpot DLC to get, so if you don't have DLC you don't really have a good alternative. You can run this build without the Seeing Dead, and if you don't have DLC you might want to go for the antifreeze, but you're going to be at a disadvantage. As for the bonus rolls on the Seeing Dead, you want to make sure you've got bonus melee damage. That is the most important thing, as it's going to help the face puncher out a lot. All the other rolls, really not that important. As for the skills, you want as many points in the Donnybrook as possible, but the melee damage takes priority over Donnybrook. So if you've got a Seeing Dead that boosts melee damage but has 0 points in the Donnybrook, take it either way because that's going to be a good damage boost. As for the artifact, I'm using the static charge, and I'm specifically using elemental stone static charges. I have one in corrosive, fire, shock, and radiation. So shock, radiation, fire, I've got corrosive equipped. I have a static charge, When you slide around, you build up a static charge, causing your next melee attack to do 50% bonus shock damage that chains to nearby enemies. Now this is kind of a lie. All your melee attacks will have a bonus 50% bonus shock damage by default, essentially giving you 2 elemental stone effects on 1 artifact, which is pretty cool. And the static charge chain thing, its damage is boosted the more you slide. So if you slide around a lot, the chain's actually going to do more damage. Now this is great on Zane because when this chain hits, it can proc the Seeing Death's effect, which means that when you use, which is really handy because the face puncher can pretty much proc the static charges, static charge tendril thing on in a large group of enemies, essentially turning it into a brainstormer shotgun. And when you shoot an enemy, when you shoot it into a group of enemies, your action skills are just never going to go down thanks to the static charge, which is really, really cool. The reason I'm using elemental stones is for just purely the most amount of damage. You could have one with a cut purse effect on it, which will give you essentially infinite ammo, as when you melee an enemy you'll gain ammo back for whatever ammo type you're holding. Since the face punch is a shotgun that shoots melee attacks, you've got basically infinite ammo with a cut purse, but you're losing damage, so that's something to be mindful of. And you could also use a knife drain, but that just gives you lifesteal and you'll be invincible. But we've got ways to keep yourselves alive outside of a knife drain, and I prefer the extra damage. As for the bonus rolls on it, bonus melee damage is ideal, but you can literally have the bonus effects on it be whatever. The main important thing is to make sure you've got an elemental stone effect on a static charge. That's the important bit. As for another artifact you could use is the White Elephant artifact. White Elephant has a 30% chance to apply a sticky grenade on a melee attack, and it's a very, very popular combo when used on the face puncher, and it's a very powerful one at that. I just personally hate the White Elephant, and I wanted to show that you don't need the White Elephant with this build, even though Zane is the worst character for the face puncher. Even he doesn't need the White Elephant, which is really cool. And yeah, that basically wraps up all the gear. Alright, moving on to the gear. On screen right now should be a picture of all the skill trees, so feel free to pause the video and screenshot that for future reference. As for the action skills I'm using, as I've mentioned, I'm using the clone and I'm using the barrier. As you can see, we've capstoned the blue tree and then spread our points fairly evenly in the orange and green tree. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a clone build that doesn't capstone the orange tree, which means we don't grab double barrel. And I'll go over why I didn't do that in a moment, actually. So first off, let's go into the blue tree. First, we've got 5 points into violent momentum. You gain increased gun damage while moving. The quicker you move, the more gun damage you get. This is arguably Zane's best skill in the game, as if you're moving at a high enough speed, you'll be able to give yourself up to thousands of percentage extra gun damage, which is insane. And this is how Zane can do a lot of damage, and it synergizes a lot with other skills. Speaking of, 5 points in the violent speed. After you kill an enemy, Zane gains increased movement speed for a few seconds, and this effect stacks. Now, most of Zane's kill skills actually stack twice, which is really handy. This gives you bonus movement speed, which stacks really well with violent momentum. More speed equals more damage. That's kind of a rule with Zane. Speed equals damage. Next, we'll go at 5 points in the cool hand. You'll gain increased reload speed, and after you kill an enemy, your reload speed will be increased even further. Being able to reload really quickly is really nice to have for DPS. Next, we've got 1 point into salvation. After you kill an enemy, your weapons gain lifesteal for a few seconds. Now, on most normal Zane builds that aren't using the face puncher, you only need 1 point here because it just gives you infinite healing. On this build, we're going 1 point because our clone is able to get healing, as the face puncher has one annoying effect that really makes it annoying to use on Zane. It cannot trigger salvation, which means we do not get lifesteal from the face puncher. And the reason we're grabbing salvation, as I just mentioned, is because the clone can utilize salvation. Now this means that the clone can heal itself a little bit with salvation, but what this actually does, and the reason we're using it, is because it can proc salvation for us. When the clone shoots an enemy, it will trigger salvation, and that will heal us. I don't know why that is, but it's a really cool interaction, and essentially that's why we're not grabbing double barrel, as if we use double barrel, we'll be essentially giving our clone a copy of our face puncher, and that will mean that the clone won't be able to heal us. And you might say, why not just give a clone a different weapon? Well, at that point the clone's able to just, kill things for us, which is not the idea of this build. The idea of this build was to show off that Zane himself, you, could use the face puncher to destroy things. Not watch the clone, destroy everything for you while you, kill maybe kill an enemy or two with your face puncher. That's not the idea of this build. So with this skill and not grabbing double barrel, the clone goes from being a, I'll just watch you kill everything action skill to I'll be a fucking medic for you, and you keep me alive, I keep you alive situation, which is really cool. And it's a really interesting gameplay loop, as you're constantly kind of defending your medic, as if the medic dies, it's like a game when you have to defend the medic. The medic will keep you alive so long as you can keep him alive, which is really cool. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent. Next we've got Death Follows Close. All your kill skills get increased effect and duration. Very handy considering we've got a lot of kill skills. Next we've got 5 points into Violence. After you kill an enemy, you'll get increased fire rate, and this effect stacks twice. More fire rate equals better DPS. What's not to love? Next we've got 2 points into Playing Dirty. Whenever you kill an enemy, your next 5 shots have a chance to fire an additional projectile. We're only grabbing 2 points to go down the skill tree, and an extra projectile on a multi-pellet weapon isn't really that great. It's kinda handy, as it does give you a little bit of bonus damage, especially with the face punch, and we need all the damage we can get, but not necessary on a multi-pellet weapon. Well, it's an extra pellet from a 7 pellet weapon. So instead of 7 pellets, it'd be 8 pellets. It's not necessary. Next we've got 1 point into Good Misfortune. Killing an enemy increases your action skill duration. This skill has diminishing returns. This skill essentially, when paired with the Seeing Dead, gives your action skills infinite duration so long as you're shooting enemies. And you only need 1 point here because with the static charge, we're hitting enemies a lot all the time, meaning we're getting a big chunk of our duration back all the time, which is really handy. The diminishing returns bid eventually drops off to a point where it doesn't give you any diminishing returns, and so long as you're shooting, it's not really noticeable. Lastly, for the blue tree, we're grabbing Seeing Red. Activating an action skill automatically activates all your kill skills. This is great for starting off boss fights or mobbing engagements, and if you want to run this build without the Seeing Dead is a necessity, as getting all your kill skills back is going to be a really good thing to have, as if you can cycle your action skills, your kill skills will stay up all the time, which is good. Anyway, moving on to the green tree, we're grabbing 5 points into Ready for Action. You'll get increased shield recharge rate and shield recharge delay. This is really good for helping our Stinger stay full all the time, so it gives us the bonus 50% melee damage, which is great. Next we've got 1 point into Hardy Stock. Zane gains increased maximum shield capacity. Only need 1 point here just to go down the skill tree, as no other skill really helped out. Adrenaline at 5 out of 5. You'll get increased action skill cooldown rate the more full your shields are. This is really handy to have, so in case our clone or our barrier goes down, as if our clone goes down we don't get lifesteal, meaning that we've lost our medic. If our barrier goes down, we're going to be taking damage all the time, so that's a problem. So having this skill will help get our shields, action skills back as quickly as possible. So if you say your clone dies on you, you're not going to be completely defenseless or from your lifesteal ability for a long period of time. Very handy. Next we've got 3 points in the Stiff Upper Lip. Whenever you damage enemy, you gain damage resistance against that damage type. A little bit of damage resistance doesn't hurt, and it's again best kind of the here to just go into the skill tree, as Brain Freeze and Rise to the Occasion aren't really good skills for this build, as we can't hit critical hits to freeze enemies with Brain Freeze, and the health regeneration of Rise to the Occasion only really works if you've got a shield that is broken or is really low, and we want our shield to be full all the time. Next we've got confident confidence. Whenever while your shields are active, you gain increased gun damage and accuracy. The more full your shields are, the more bonuses you get. This is great for damage, and as you know, more damage equals more damage. Clearly. And better accuracy on a shotgun means a tighter spread, and a tighter spread means a better effective range, which means your pellet's going to hit, all your pellets are going to hit things from further away, which is really nice. Lastly, for the green tree skills, we've got really expensive jacket. Elemental status effects applied to Zane have reduced duration. This is great because status effects are annoying, so having them disappear quicker is good. As for the augments for a barrier, we're grabbing All-Rounder. This turns your barrier into a dome, covering you on all sides. This increases the cooldown rate, but that's not really a big issue. And this gives us great survivability. Next, the other augment we're using is Deterrence Field. When an enemy touches the barrier, they take shock damage and are staggered. The shock damage actually does scale off of your Mayhem level, which is nice, so it does a little bit of damage. But the big thing here is the stagger. A melee enemy can't touch you if they touch the barrier, and since you'll be able to pick up the barrier and wear it all the time, this essentially means that melee attacking enemies just literally can't hurt you. And you can actually bully enemies with this, as you can just walk into them and then walk backwards and then walk into them, walk backwards, etc, etc, putting him into an infinite stun lock, which is really funny and really handy. So yeah, that's all the green tree. Lastly, onto the orange tree, we've got 5 points in the borrowed time. You'll gain increased action skill duration for every active action skill. Having your action skills last even longer is really handy, and that's just great to have. Next, we've got 4 points in the synchronicity. Whenever one or more of your action skills are active, you get increased gun damage for each active action skill. Now, as I've briefly mentioned, stacking gun damage up by a lot leads to diminishing returns, and yeah, that can be a problem. So this bonus might not be a lot, as it's 16% in my case per active action skill, so that's only 32%. Yeah, 32% I think. And that's not a big amount, but hey, it's better than no damage, and we need points to go down the skill tree. Next, we've got 5 points in the Donnybrook. Whenever you kill an enemy, you and your Digiclone gain increased gun damage, and you gain some health regeneration, and this affects stacks twice. Health regeneration is nice if the clone is not healing you, or it's off on cooldown and you take damage, as getting your health back is always nice. And the bonus damage is actually pretty good, as at 10 out of 10 points in Donnybrook, you gain 45% bonus gun damage. Stack that up twice, you gain 90% gun damage. And with the Seeing Dead, that's going to be active all the time. So that's a lot of extra gun damage, which is kind of handy. Next, we've got 1 point in the Quick Breather. Whenever you swap places with your clone, your shield immediately begins recharging, and you restore health to the clone. This is great for keeping your shields up so you do more damage, and keeping your clone alive so it can heal you. Again, having that really cool, like, medic, soldier, synergy, which is kind of cool. Next, we've got Old You. When you're in fight for your life, you can kill your clone and gain a second win immediately. This also gives you the extra ability where if you're in fight for your life and your clone dies, or your clone just ends its action skill because its duration ran out, you'll get a second win automatically as well, which is really handy actually. So you don't even need to destroy the clone yourself. If it just dies, you'll get a second win, which is cool. Next, we've got 3 points in the Supersonic Man. When one or more of your action skills are active, you gain increased movement speed for each active action skill. More movement speed equals damage on Zane, so this is a nice pickup. Next, we've got 1 point in the pocket for grenades. Whenever you kill an enemy, you'll gain grenade regeneration, and this affects stacks twice. We're grabbing this because we're grabbing Boom Enhance. Whenever Zane summons his Digiclone, it consumes up to 3 grenades. For every grenade consumed, the Digiclone gains increased gun damage, max health, fire rate, reload speed, and duration. So essentially, we want grenades so we can get the best effect make our clone the best it can be. And since our kill skills are going to be up all the time, the grenade regeneration is going to be able to regenerate 3 grenades quickly enough, so if our clone dies constantly, we're still able to, keep it up at doing its best. And the big thing here is the duration and the max health of our clone, as that makes it a lot more tankier. And even though we're not using double barrel to give our clone even a lot more damage, just we can just give it a gun. The damage the clone without double barrel can do is actually pretty decent. It can hit for about 300 to 400,000 damage per shot, and it shoots relatively quick. So it can still kill things even without double barrel, which is kind of cool. As for the augment, we're grabbing Doppelbanger. Basically, this allows you to hold your action skill button to aim the clone early. This is great for, you know, if you've completed a mobbing area and you're moving on to the next area, you can just destroy the clone and run to the next area, and then by the time you're there, you'll be able to deploy your clone again, and you'll be set to go. Very handy. And the other augment is Schadenfreude. When your clone takes damage, your shields get restored by a portion of that damage. This is great for keeping your shields up, and this is a nice thing to have. And yeah, that wraps up everything for the skills. Lastly, I want to go over the Mayhem Modifiers real quick. The modifiers I'm using are Speed Demon, Mob Mentality, Drone Ranger, and Not the Face. Speed Demon is great because it gives you bonus movement speed whenever you kill enemies, and this effect stacks up to 3 times, so and as I've mentioned, speed equals damage with Zane, so this essentially gives you even more damage with Zane, which is really cool. Mob Mentality makes it where enemies deal more damage and have a faster fire rate when near other enemies. This isn't really a problem with Zane, as he has a lifesteal and a barrier that stops you from taking damage, period. So even though they do a bit more damage and fire a bit faster, you will be taking more damage, but with Zane it's really not an issue. The alternative to this is running Healy Avenger. The Healy Avenger makes it where enemies that die spawn a little heart drone that slowly floats around. If it touches an enemy, it will heal them. If you destroy it, it will drop health files and you can get healed from them. So as long as you're killing enemies quickly enough, it's not really an issue, the Healy Avenger, so that's best in slot, but I'm using Mob Mentality. As for the hard modifier, I'm using Drone Ranger. Enemies that have a chance to spawn with a healing drone, and if an enemy dies, the healing drone will look for a new target to support. The healing from these drones is really not that big of an issue unless there's like multiple drones on a single target. Otherwise, these drones basically act as 3-second wins for you, which is really handy. The only other alternative to Drone Ranger is Ticked Off. Ticked Off just makes it where status effects do a lot less damage, and this build's not really focused on status effect damage, so that can be a good option as well. However, I don't think you can get Ticked Off with the Not the Face Very Hard modifier, which is the very hard modifier I use and I recommend highly. Not the Face makes it where critical hit damage is reduced by 75%. Now, as I've mentioned, the Face Puncher and Melee period just can't hit critical hits, so when running a melee build or a face puncher build, Not the Face is essentially a non-consequential modifier, and this is the best in slot. The only other real alternatives is Buddy System and Postmortem, but I really don't recommend running those on a build when you're using melee or builds that don't require critical hits, as Not the Face is just the superior option in that case. And yeah, that wraps up about everything for this build. It's a very straightforward build. Deploy a clone, deploy a barrier, grab your barrier and hold it, and then just go to town killing everything. Make sure to switch places with your clone to keep it alive and get it into a position where it can heal you properly. And so long as your clone is alive, you'll stay alive. If your clone dies, it's not the end of the world, as you'll be able to still kill things very effectively, and the barrier is going to stop you from taking damage, but you want to make sure you stay alive long enough so your clone can come back and keep you alive. It's a very interesting like soldier medic kind of, you know, synergy, as so long as your clone's alive, you stay alive, as you'll get life steal and you'll be able to, you know, have a distraction. It's really handy. So yeah, that's everything about this build actually. So yeah, that wraps up this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to hit that like button, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more, and comment down below if you actually got to the end of this video and enjoyed this build actually, and maybe even tried it out for yourself. I know the Face Puncher is a weapon more suited for someone like Amara who has melee skills, or even Flak and Mose who can utilize them with a bunch of different, you know, ways, like most can boost the splash damage of the White Elephant Artefact, and Flak has some stupid interactions with other gear and shit, which is really interesting. And well, Zane is the worst character in my opinion for the Face Puncher. He can still make it work very well, and it's still one of his best guns, which just goes to show how broken the Face Puncher is. The Face Puncher, in my opinion, is the best gun in the game, as it's a gun that any character can use, and it's relatively really easy to use. It might not be the hardest hitting gun in the game, but its ease of use and the fact that any character can use it, including a character like Zane who actually has problems when using it, like no lifesteal ability, and can still make it a very viable build, shows that the Face Puncher is just strong. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'll talk to you guys later.